The living room was full of things, tables and lots of chairs, all with crocheted antimacassars, pictures and pennants and fans on the wall, a big melodeon at one end of the room with very old sheet music on it, and in the wide doorway there were portieres all made of beads which rattled like rain on a tin roof when Mrs. Wheelwright brushed against them. The place was so full of animals and plants and furniture that Mr. and Mrs. Wheelwright just walked around their house on little paths. It was rather a stuffy, crowded way to live, Randy thought, but very interesting and never lonesome. She lay quiet on the big, full-bodied couch that was covered with a stiff, stinging plush like nettles. Mrs. Wheelwright brought her a frosted doughnut and a glass of root beer. The canaries sang madly, and the lovebirds screamed at each other in the customary way of lovebirds. One of the cats sat on the arm of the couch with his tail curled around his paws, and the oldest, fattest dog kept trying to sit up and beg, and falling over because of too much fat. "That's Teeny," Mrs. Wheelwright said proudly. "She's 14 years old." "My sister Mona is almost 14 too," Randy remarked, "but not so fat for her size." "My lands!" cried Mrs. Wheelwright in consternation. "Your brother and sister have been waiting outside all this time. They'd probably like some doughnuts too." Deftly she made her way between tables and chairs and over cats and dogs to the front door. Rush and Mona came in looking hungry and sat down behaving like company. "Are you really all right, Rand, darling?" inquired Mona, as Mrs. Wheelwright bustled into the kitchen, leaving the bead portieres rattling. "I'm fine," Randy said. "I like this place." Mrs. Wheelwright returned with more doughnuts and root beer. "Your little sister got a pretty bad cut," she told Rush and Mona. "Oh, she's always doing something," Rush said between mouthfuls and during them. Randy blushed modestly. "She broke her collarbone when she was 4, and she knocked out 2 front baby teeth when she fell off the rocking horse the same year. And then when she was 6, she got stuck in a revolving door, and last year she almost got suffocated with coal gas, and she fell out of a boat in Central Park in New York City, too," added Mona. "Nobody ever does that." "Oh, it wasn't anything," said Randy, feeling pleased. "Yes, and she set the house on fire once by accident," continued Rush. "And she was the only one of our family that got mumps the time we had mumps at school." "Well," said Mrs. Wheelwright, "things just seem to happen to you, don't they, honey?" Then Mr. Wheelwright came in and offered to drive Randy home in the next-door neighbor's pickup truck. But no, Randy wanted to ride her bike. "That's right," said Rush approvingly. "After a crash, they always make aviators fly again, so they won't lose their nerve." "Only don't get too far ahead of me," begged Randy. Before she left, she thanked Mrs. Wheelwright. "Can I come and see you sometimes?" she asked. "You come whenever you want to, honey," Mrs. Wheelwright said. "Maybe you'd like to come on Thursdays when I let the birds fly around the house. Or maybe you'd like to come on Saturdays when I bake cookies." "Maybe I'd like to come both times," Randy suggested greedily, and Mrs. Wheelwright seemed to think that was a good idea. Randy enjoyed the ride home. Her bicycle appeared to be repentant of its past actions, and took her docilely in at the gate, down the hill and along the drive without a single fall. "My lands!" cried Cuffy when she saw her. "You look like the spirit of '76. The Carthage traffic cop has an alligator in his bathtub," Randy told her. "The what?" Cuffy looked startled. "You sure your head feels all right?" But Oliver, who was getting ready for his bath, said gloomily, "A bathtub's a good place for an alligator, not for a boy like me. Alligators like water." That night, Randy had her supper in bed, chicken broth and toast and lemon jelly, just like a real invalid. And afterward, everyone came up to see her. Mrs. Oliphant and Father made her promise to ride her bike only on the home grounds until she became more expert. Before she turned out the light, Randy took inventory of her wounds. There were 4 dark bruises and a skinned knee on her right leg, 5 dark bruises and a scratched shin on her left. She also had a swollen wrist and a scraped elbow. But the crowning glory, the best wound, the one she valued above all others, was the deep cut on her forehead. Maybe it will leave a scar, she thought hopefully. Oh, if only it would. A distinguished little white scar that she could point to and say casually, "This? Oh, I got this the time I ran into the back of the bus." It had been a good day, a wonderful day. She had a new bicycle, she had made new friends, and probably she was going to have a scar.